Welcome friends to another Stuff Station 1 review from my collection of random items across a broad price range. Items are showcased for their aesthetics, materials, manufacturing or downright quirkiness. Now today's review is a continuation of the breakdown, if you like, where I discuss the various different elements of a recent purchase that I made from Rolex. Now I've discussed various aspects of this particular piece, and today's area is where I'll focus on the actual case construction, the bezel and the actual crown itself of the actual piece. Now obviously these focus around Rolex's use of metals. Now Rolex is famous for actually having its own foundry, so it will actually manufacture its own metals and it alloys its own metals. Now usually in the watch industry the standard for the steel that they use is what's known as a 316L steel, and that you will find on the vast majority of Swiss and non-Swiss timepieces. And obviously if the pieces are made from a noble metal or a precious metal, then that's something different. But on the whole, I mean, you've got steels that are used quite a bit. Now Rolex is very different, okay? It will alloy its metals, but it uses its own metal, and that's known as Oyster Steel 904L. Now the reason why they alloy it to a different composition is so that it's more scratch resistant, and so that it takes basically a better polish as well, and you can see that's reflected here in the center links of the actual sports bracelet that we've got here. You know, this particular piece has a real high polish finish. Now I do still have some of the stickers on here, so you won't get the full effect on these pieces, but if you know, I showed you before here, you know, it's a really high polished sort of finish. Now the actual case itself, it is a 40mm case. All right, now lug to lug, so from one end to the other, it measures 48mm, and you know, I find it quite a nice sort of small to medium size, particularly for my 6.5-inch wrist, and I'll do a wrist shot for you guys shortly. The actual profile of the actual watch itself is 13mm, so it's fairly sort of thin, and you know, it does really sit well on the actual wrist itself. Now the case itself is what's known as the Oyster Case, and it's very similar to the Rolex cases that you will find on the Submariners and on the Explorer models. So you know, there is that sort of design lineage, if you like, on this particular piece with that Oyster model. All right, so with that Oyster Case. Now here you can see it on the wrist. You know, if I just take it back a bit, you know, I find that this particular piece is so versatile because you can wear it with a suit cuff, and if you look here, it really goes down quite nicely under that cuff. So it's got that sort of thinness to it, but again, because of the size of the watch, because of the colors that have been used, because of this sports bracelet, you know, you can wear it with sort of a sporting attire as well at the same time. So that's how the actual watch sort of sits on the actual hand. All right, now the actual Milgauss, it's unlike, you know, a lot of the other sports models, it is a very polished aesthetic. There is a polished aesthetic to this piece, and as I've said, it's unlike sort of most Rolex watches. You know, you've got a highly polished sort of case, you've got the bracelet. I mean, on the Submariner bracelet, I mean, it's all sort of brushed, but here you've got the you know, a three-piece sort of linked bracelet, but the center sort of channel is all highly polished, right the way down to the actual clasp within the actual bracelet itself. Now the only downside to that is it's an absolute scratch magnet. Friends, why not subscribe, like and share? Also, tap that bell icon. I put out content every week, so your support would be really appreciated. You know, I buy these watches to wear. You know, I'm not going to baby them and keep them, you know, in a box. You know, I want to wear them, and it's just something that is inevitable. You know, they will pick up scratches over a period of time. Okay, but over a period of time, it will sort of lend itself to that sort of beat up look, if you like. Now, the actual bezel, as I've mentioned here, it is a polished, highly polished bezel, and that's where that 904L Rolex Oyster steel really comes in, because the polishers at Rolex in Geneva are really able to give it that sort of mirror-like finish. And you know, I've got some fingerprint marks on it, but you can just imagine when I got this new, it was just absolutely gleaming. So that's the actual bezel itself. Now, the crown is actually a screw down crown, okay, and it's what's known as, let me get a bit of zoom there, a twin lock. So there is a double gasket system in there, okay, so it sort of locks the crown in sort of two places. And if you have a look at that sort of little line in relief, that's the symbol for it being a twin lock. Whereas you'll find with the Submariners, okay, they will actually have three little dots underneath the Rolex coronet there that suggests it's a triple lock system. And obviously they have a triple lock system because they are divers watches, and the Submariner, I believe, has a depth rating of 300 meters, whereas the Milgauss itself is water resistant to 100 meters. So that's why you have the twin lock sort of system. Now, the thing that I love about this, when you unscrew it, when I got my hands on it for the first time, and you know, I attempted to change the time changing operation is just so smooth, it's unbelievable. Okay, usually with some watches you can feel this sort of almost sort of a minimal grainy sort of, you know, texture and feel when you're winding it, but on this there's just absolutely nothing. Okay, and the other thing that I'm going to do for you, I'm going to do a close-up sort of a microphone shot where you can actually, you'll be able to hear the winding up of the actual movement itself, and you hear this really nice, satisfying sort of clicking sound that sort of emanates within the actual movement itself. And it's something that, you know, I've not really heard in sort of other sort of Swiss timepieces. The other thing that I've noticed though is, you know, there is a little bit of wobble on that crown. Now, you know, it's a Rolex, and I'm sure that with a lot of these Swiss watches, I've got a Girard Perregaux, and there is a bit of wobble on there. And I suppose, you know, you've got that stem that joins the crown. You know, you're not going to get it absolutely sort of solid and stiff. So there is a little bit of wobble. I perhaps expect it to be a little bit sort of less, but that's just one thing that I've sort of picked up on, and that's not me saying that that's an issue, it's just something that I sort of picked up on. The actual back of the case itself, as I mentioned, it's an Oyster Case, so if we look here we can actually see Rolex has engraved its logo on there, so we can see the logo there, it says there Rolex Oyster, and we can actually see that the piece has been engraved with sort of black paint infilling there with the name of the model. Now, as I mentioned in another video, that is very un-Rolex like. Okay, Rolex are tool watches, all right, and they don't do any kind of like decoration on the back. They do not have exhibition case backs, but you will only find two models in the Rolex collection that has the name and or any type of sort of aesthetic sort of labeling on the back, and that's this particular piece along with the Rolex Deep Sea, I believe. Okay, so that was the breakdown, the teardown, if you like, of the case, the bezel, and the crown construction. So, you know, I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, then please consider subscribing, liking, or having a dialogue by pressing the buttons below. And many thanks for watching, and goodbye for now.